Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots Monday Morning. I'm Katie Halper and I'm joined by
Aaron Maté sitting in for Maté.
yes, for a long time. Happy Martin Luther King Day, by the way.
Happy MLK Day.
Before we get into the stories before we get into our Monday morning regular segment, and of course that's when we go over the Sunday morning shows that we watch, so you don't have to. Just wanted to remind people that the media really was terrible to Martin Luther King after he started talking about war and class, and they told him to stay in his lane, and so we should at some point maybe do a Meet the Press on MLK and Meet the Press and how terrible they were surrounding him. So just want to say that as we go through today's federal holiday. So let's just get to the show. Let's start the regular show. And let's start with the first clip, which we have, which is a Meet the Press. Meet the Press does a little roundup of Biden. We're going to start with that.
Good Sunday morning. Every new administration enters office with an agenda of optimism. For President Biden, the plan was that COVID would be defeated, the economy would fully recover, and he would be able to deliver a return to normalcy. But plans have a way of going sideways. A year into Mr. Biden's presidency, unemployment is down, wages are up, but inflation is also up to a 40-year high. Infrastructure and COVID relief bills were passed, but Build Back Better is stuck in neutral. And most important, though vaccines are available and effective, Delta and Omicron have dealt a 1-2 punch to the economy, the supply chain, and that promised return to normalcy. And on Thursday, the Supreme Court blocked Mr. Biden's vaccine or test mandate for large businesses, perhaps taking away the last effective tool in his COVID toolbox. That same day, Mr. Biden's last-minute push for voting rights bills was dealt a likely fatal blow. Democratic Senator Kyrsten Sinema said again what she's been saying for months. She is opposed to changing the filibuster to pass this legislation. So now what? All of this came just as the president was heading, by the way, to Capitol Hill to lobby fellow Democrats to change the Senate rules. So it was quite the exclamation point on a terrible week.
All right. So that's a good roundup, I think, of some of the things that didn't get done by Biden.
Yeah, it's a good roundup. I'm just I'm enthralled by Chuck Todd's voice.
Oh, really? Are you?
Yeah, there's something so it's so creepy about it.
You know, it is kind of creepy.
Everything sounds so. It's just. I wonder if he ever expresses an honest thought. It's just something so. I don't know. I feel like. I don't know. I feel like if I was like taking a prison ever, I feel like Chuck Todd would be like. I could see like the prison guard sort of like constantly gaslighting and saying, "Are you enjoying your stay? You having a good stay here?"
Yeah.
I don't know.
So you find him creepy or seductive or both?
I find him both creepy.
Oh, yeah, it's often the killer combo. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's just a good roundup. I think usually they beat up on him on Meet the Press about Afghanistan. They haven't mentioned that. You know, it would be a nice time, by the way, media out there who pretends to care about humanitarian issues. You may want to talk about the fact that the people of Afghanistan are starving in large part because of the sanctions against the Taliban and, of course, the freezing of assets. So waiting for the media that was very mad at Biden for ending the war, which he didn't really do, but kind of ending the war in Afghanistan. Maybe they could talk about this.
Yeah, and of course, that was the biggest thing for a long time. Oh my God, we're abandoning the people of Afghanistan. We're abandoning our allies. And now they are starving under sanctions, and the U.S. has billions of dollars of Afghanistan's money, their foreign reserves just stolen, and won't give it up because the Taliban is the government, and no one cares.
Yeah,
it's
no one cares. It's really quite awful. Yeah. So and the big story, of course, for this week is voting rights. The fact that some Democrats want to carve out a filibuster carve out so they could actually pass some voting rights acts. And they were blocked by, not surprisingly, Sinema and Manchin. So just wanted to set that up, obviously, because that's going to be relevant in the clips moving forward. So should we go on to the next clip?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Clyburn, thanks so much for joining us. Before we dive into the issues, tomorrow is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. What are you thinking about this weekend as one of the last prominent civil rights heroes from that era?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Judge. You know, I spent a lot of time on yesterday, the actual birthday, reflecting on King's letter from the Birmingham City Jail. That letter, I reread that letter every year, and I always get something out of it that I didn't see there before. And I focused yesterday on his whole question of why we can't wait, silence, all these questions that King left with us. He said to us in that letter something that is very, very, I would call it consequential today. And that is this: silence gives consent. We have too much silence in the face of what's going on around us today. I remember corporations stepping up when Georgia was passing those draconian voter laws down there. All of a sudden now, they have gone silent. And King told us in that letter that we are going to be made to repent, not just for the vitriolic words and deeds of bad people, but for the appalling silence of good people. That's what I was thinking about all yesterday.
That's interesting because Hillary Clinton tweeted a famous quote from that letter from the Birmingham jail, and it was about the white moderate. Hillary Clinton tweeted, Martin Luther King Jr. said, quote, "I had hoped that the white moderate would understand that law and order exist for the purposes of establishing justice, and that when they fail in this purpose, they become the dangerously structured dams that blow the flow of social progress," unquote. Then Hillary Clinton added, quote, "This is a subtweet." A subtweet is when you're talking about somebody without naming them. Presumably, Secretary Clinton was talking about Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. As you know, much of that letter is about how allies of the civil rights movement could be more problematic than enemies of the civil rights movement, the white moderate. Do you agree with that comparison? And is that what's happening today in the U.S. Senate?
I do agree with that. Today is Sunday. If you remember, King was sitting in jail. He received a letter from 8 white clergymen who wrote him about their concern. They asked him to leave Birmingham, and they said that they thought his cause was right, but his timing was wrong. And King said to them, time is neutral. Time can either be used destructively or constructively. And that's when he said that he was coming to the conclusion that the people of ill will in our society were making a much better use of time than the people of goodwill. And so I would say that to my friends in the Senate now. People of ill will demonstrated on January 6th how effective they can use their time. Are we going to step up, the people of goodwill, and use our time more effectively? That letter, you know, I always say, Jack, that aside from the Bible, I do believe that that letter may be the most timeless document I've ever read.
All right.
So President Biden went to Georgia this week to push for Sinema and Manchin and others to get rid of the filibuster in order to pass these 2 election reform bills. And the president asked this question, quote, "Do you want to be on the side of Abraham Lincoln or Jefferson Davis?" What do you say to Democrats who say that that went too far, to compare somebody who opposes changing the filibuster with a traitor who fought a war for slavery?
I would ask those people, what do you think is going too far? Is it going too far to criminalize giving somebody a bottle of water, standing in line trying to vote, standing in line for 4 and 5 hours? Is that going too far? Is it going too far to put in place mechanisms to nullify a vote when people have cast their votes? If you don't like the outcome, then you got the power.
Okay. So you get the point. And I do want to read a comment that someone just made, and we're going to look into this further because it's an important thing to look into. DC writes, the legislation raises the financial requirements for third-party ballot access. It's not about voting rights, enough with the partisan propaganda. So we'll look into that. I've heard that argument made. I have to read up on it. And I have a feeling it's maybe a combination of things. It's both has progressive enfranchising, re-enfranchising response to the gutting of the Voting Rights Act. And there probably is some stuff in it that's very bad for third parties. So we'll have to look into that. But what do you think about the white moderate? Do you guys want to see the white moderate? Actually, we have the white moderate that Hillary Clinton is subtweeting.
I strongly support those efforts to contest these laws in court and to invest significant resources into these states to better organize and stop efforts to restrict access at the ballot box. And I strongly support and will continue to vote for legislative responses to address these state laws, including the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act that the Senate is currently considering. I support these bills because they strengthen Americans' access to the ballot box, and they better ensure that Americans' votes are counted fairly. It is through elections that Americans make their voices heard, select their representatives, and guide the future of our countries and our community. These bills help treat the symptoms of the disease, but they do not fully address the disease itself. And while I continue to support these bills, I will not support separate actions that worsen the underlying disease of division infecting our country. The debate over the Senate 60-vote threshold shines a light on our broader challenges. There's no need for me to restate my longstanding support for the 60-vote threshold to pass legislation. There's no need for me to restate its role protecting our country from wild reversals in federal policy. It is a view I've held during my years serving in both the U.S. House and the Senate, and it is the view I continue to hold.
So that was interesting. That's a white moderate in action / big hypocrite in action.
Also, someone who's on the verge of tears, it sounds like.
I know. That's how moved she is. That's how moved she is by the filibuster.
Is she so moved because she believes so strongly in blocking voting rights, or is she so moved because she's knows that she's on the side of evil all the time, and it's like having a moment of it hitting her conscience,
right? So
she's trying to fight back the tears on that.
Well, her shtick, her lie, the big lie is that she's pro voting rights, but anti. What she can't do is she can't support a carve out of the filibuster because the filibuster is so sacred.
Oh yes, we need the filibuster.
Right? We need the 60 vote. We need to require the 60 votes,
which has been used historically to attack voting rights and other efforts to end or to thwart racism in this country.
Right. Yeah. It's disgusting. Sorry, 61 votes. I said 60 instead of 50. That's was a Freudian slip. And of course, they carved out the filibuster. They didn't filibuster, or they changed the filibuster so that they could vote to raise the debt ceiling. Was she up in arms about that? This is all process, and it's bullshit. And she's moved by it, apparently. I don't know. She's awful. So. That's cinema for you guys.
She's awful, but she sounds upset. So,
she's awful, but she's so upset. But she's upset because I think she's upset because the filibuster is being threatened. Like, I really actually think that's what she's upset about.
Hey, we're all moved by different things.
Fan. Yeah, whatever floats your boat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we go to the next clip, which is from good friend of show Jim Carville.
Oh. Joining me now is a familiar face, Democratic strategist James Carville. He's been pretty outspoken about what he thinks Democrats need to do and need to stop doing to stay in power in 2022. James, welcome back to Meet the Press, sir.
Thank you, Chuck.
I know you're. Let me start with what we're seeing right now. We're about to be at the 1-year mark. It's a tough moment for this presidency, and I know you've argued 2021 is the greatest story never told. But I'm curious, right? You have a public that is just in a bad mood. You just know they are, right? COVID, they're in a bad mood. How do you sell the good stuff that you believe he can sell to a country that's not very receptive right now?
You gloat and you promote. You talk about the
Gloat
fact
and promote.
that we pretend to care about child poverty, although no columnist that I read in the paper ever talks about it. It's the lowest child poverty rate we've had in history. We claim that we care about hourly workers. Hourly workers today have more leverage at any time they've ever had in my 7.
I love that. He says, we claim that we care about hourly workers. And he's emphasizing claim.
Right.
I'm not sure if he actually does care about hourly workers, but he's emphasizing that we claim that we care.
I think I think he's trying to call out some Democrats.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, honestly. He seems to be chiding. I think what he's doing here, honestly, is trying to gaslight people. So if you're upset about Biden not achieving more, you're being ungrateful about the way he's cut child poverty. I think that's what he's trying to do. Yeah. Right?
Yes. By the way, great freeze frame right here.
I know.
The teeth.
I mean, you can understand
why tough.
Mary Matlin, had to go outside her party. You understand why this cross-partisan romance between him and Mary Matlin, the Republican spin doctor, and this Democrat spin doctor, why it wasn't a meeting of minds, but it was a meeting of loins. Because he's just oozing with attraction. Yeah. Okay.
27 years of existence on this planet. All right. You talk about we want jobs, 6.4 million jobs, more jobs than any president ever created in the first term. What you do, Chuck, is you run on what you got. You don't run on what you didn't get. And the stuff you got is pretty good. If they don't pass voting rights, if they don't pass Build Back Better, run on that in 2022. All they're going to run on is the 2020 election returns or getting Adam Schiff or Jamie Raskin back with revenge. So just focus on what you got, what you've done, and what you want to do to make people's lives better. That's it. And you got to go out and you got to gloat and you got to promote. And if inflation is still at 7% in November this year, we'll lose anyway. But I don't think a lot of people don't think that's going to be the case.
You've got a situation right now, the Biden coalition, nobody's happy. Progressives aren't happy right now with how Build Back Better is gone. African-American.
What if Chuck is projecting here? He's asked 2 questions about everyone's in a bad mood. He's like, all right, okay. We all know everyone's in a bad mood. No one's happy.
You're right. Yeah.
Everyone's miserable.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about myself here. I'm very happy coming out every week on Meet the Press.
Yeah.
And being moved from my time slot. Because remember, he got bumped by Nicole Wallace. She took his time slot.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, he's like, but I'm great. I'm thrilled. I love being on at 1 p.m. I love coming out here every single week and lying through my teeth. But the public is miserable.
Right. The public, I'm fine with being replaced by a Bush lackey. That's fine. I'm fine with my hair. I'm fine with it. I'm not upset about it.
I'm cool.
I'm not in a bad mood over my hair and facial hair. Yeah. By the way, extremely important point from Kadag Radog. Didn't Mr. Jim Clyburn tell people to vote for the moderate Joe Biden during the election? He absolutely did. Because in large part because he doesn't like Medicare for all, because he's one of the top recipients of big pharma money. That's Jim Clyburn.
Oh, by the way, we didn't make sufficient fun of Hillary Clinton's comment about the white moderate. We did not. We let that slide. Well, let me just say, it's there's so many things to say about it, but the one irony of her invoking anti-racism to try to chide somebody else is that you remember she did to chide someone else for blocking social progress, which of course Sinema is doing, but Hillary Clinton has been doing, has been blocking social progress her entire career, and has even is so devoted to blocking social progress that she'll even invoke anti-racism to do that. So you remember, of course, in the debates with Bernie Sanders, when she said that breaking up the banks won't end racism.
Okay, this is a moment. It was actually a Nevada rally, and she said, "Is breaking up the banks going to end racism? No. Well, economics and sexism? No." And it was the most pathetic. We see you, Hillary. We hear you. We know what you're doing. You're trying to attack Bernie Sanders for making the connection between racial justice and economic justice. And ironically, you could look at MLK, Hillary, who you like to quote in your subtweets. If you don't understand the connections. I mean, these are the same people who constantly invoke, as they should, the pay gap between men and women and how that's worse for women of color than it is for white women, right? Hillary Clinton, we brought this up with David Cross the other day, which is that Bernie Sanders supported raising the minimum wage, right? He supported the Fight for 15 struggle. Hillary Clinton wanted it to stay at 12. The majority of minimum wage earners are women and people of color. So again, she weaponizes identity. I mean, we've talked about this before, right? But like the way she weaponizes identity politics to stop progress, to stop economic justice, which disproportionately helps people of color, is so fucking cynical.
I mean, if there is like a record of like the most like white moderate quotes of all the white moderates, I mean, that Hillary Clinton quote about that's in the top 10 for sure.
We should do that. Maybe on this week's show, we can compile a listicle and read some of them. She'll definitely get some of those.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Let's see. Let's keep playing a little bit more.
Activists are not happy about how voting rights has gone. And if you look at the polling, honestly, the thing that's cratering the most are independents. You know, the folks that just wanted the temperature turned down. You're the president. What do you fix?
Okay, that's what independents want. That's what their biggest priority is, turning the temperature down.
What do we want? Turning down the temperature.
When do we want it? Now.
Now.
Yeah. That's again, I'm going to say that's projection.
First.
Well, first of all, I agree with my friend Jim Clyburn. There's an expression that I love. It's called "sold your own."
By the way, that's what Trump nicknamed Meet the Press as Meet the Depressed. So maybe he was picking up something in Chuck.
Yeah, seriously, you're right.
Maybe that was Trump's way to to help Chuck out.
Yeah,
that was like a
cry for help on his behalf.
And I don't think we have sufficiently. If you're part of the Democratic base and you don't care about child poverty, you don't care about hourly workers, then you're really not a Democrat.
You see what he's doing? Right? He's doing that thing.
Now, I think a lot of the Democratic base has not been told or informed of the things that President Biden and this Congress has accomplished. But to me, those are the things that if I'm a Democrat, I much more care about that than some word in a dictionary.
What's he even talking about?
Children are going to bed with a full stomach and a warm house. I care that somebody, an hourly worker, is not sitting.
And you probably care about the child tax credit. Just saying.
They're working away at $7.25 an hour, and I see these signs all over, even in Louisiana and South Mississippi, $700 signing bonus. Those are real accomplishments, and there's something that you can run on. And again, you don't talk about what you didn't get. That's what these.
They also blocked an increase in the minimum wage. That was Democrats.
Aaron, it wasn't Democrats. It was the parliamentarian.
It was a parliament. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right,
remember Joe Biden campaigned on that? That was going to be such a big priority.
Yeah.
And then immediately.
Oh my God. And you got Manchin, and then of course Sinema doing her hey bop, bop. Yeah.
By the way, great comment from Rodrigo. Why is this man dressed like a small child?
Yeah.
It's a great. I mean, we all went to elementary school with someone with a kid who dressed like this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's like once he said that, I mean, I knew that the outfit was weird, but now once he said that, I'm never going to be able to unsee that. Is this him trying to look useful? By the way, come on, guys, hit the like button. I can't play it without, this is one of the annoying things about this feature. It says, come on, hit the like button on 264 with 1297 with 1362. So everyone pause. We're going to do a thing right now. Ready? Everyone pause what they're doing, which is just watching this. Now go to the like and hit it. Hit it now. Let's see if it goes up. Someone tell me if it goes up. Smash that like button. Because you guys aren't all hate watching. I always say this, we can cushion in, we can incorporate some hate watching, but I don't think that only 200 of you like the show. All right. Anyone want to tell me the number now? How many likes do we have? We'll get back to it. All right. I don't want to open the YouTube. It'll make noise. Really? Over 120 likes in 20 seconds? Really? Are we up there? All right. Let me know. All right. Let's go. Let's keep going.
Chuck, just quit being a whiny party and get out there and fight and tell people what you did and tell people the exact truth. The Republican Party stands for nothing other than let's relitigate the 2020 election.
Quit being a whiny party, says the guy who's dressed like a kid.
I know, seriously. And whining that if you're not happy with the Democrats, you don't care about child poverty.
Yeah.
Oh, let's get back at Jamie Raskin. That's it. That's the entire platform.
Is there something Joe Biden can learn about the experience you helped Bill Clinton get through after 94?
Soldier on.
Soldier on / welfare benefits. Throw your voter base under the bus.
Under the bus, yeah.
Deregulate the banks. Break up. End
Put them
Glass-Steagall.
together. Yeah.
Yeah. Deregulate the media so that media is concentrated in the hands of a couple of corporations, and yeah, that's what James Carville and Clinton can teach the Democrats, and they're following it to a T.
And also, you never know what you can get when you run a $100 bill through a trailer park, as apparently James Carville said. I think it was Paula Jones. That's what that was.
That's
what he
right.
said. Yeah, that was a great line.
That's right. Ugh.
You had a bad week, but you had a good year. People at the end of the day are going to judge you on your year and not your week. And this is a tough, hard business, and you got ups and downs. You get bruised, you get beat up, but every president goes through this. I think President Biden had, compared to his record or what's been told, is a huge differential. And I think that they're trying. I saw they were doing it. I've been talking about infrastructure since Eisenhower built the interstate highway system. Right. Man, we got $1 trillion.
I believe that, by the way.
I believe that.
I absolutely believe that James Carville's been talking about infrastructure since Eisenhower built it. Absolutely. I absolutely believe that.
Someone check how old he is and check when.
I believe it.
Let's do the math on that. Someone in the audience, you got to do it. All right.
That's probably like the truest thing ever said on Meet the Press.
Probably the truest thing, yeah. Honestly,
First, the infrastructure coming up. The children that are not living in poverty today are going to ride on better roads, have better broadband, cross better bridges. I mean, this is something we ought to be really proud of as Americans. We ought to talk about it. We ought to brag about it. We ought to tell people about it. If we do those kinds of things, we'll end up with a better outcome. I promise you.
James Carville, always a pleasure, sir. And I know you got a kick out of those LSU boys winning up in Cincinnati. So I know you're happy about that.
Go Tigers.
All right.
Burr and Chase kicking it. You's on the right track too, dude. I'll tell you.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Ross Iron Coil Foucault dressed as Dennis. That's basically what he looks like. Very good call. He is Foucault dressed as Dennis. Yeah, it's great. Yeah,
that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Someone said we can make fun of Carville, but Pelosi's off limits. No, Pelosi's not off limits. It's just that I think maybe that's a reference to our show this past week where we made fun of Tucker Carlson comparing Pelosi to Michael Jackson just because that wasn't funny.
Yeah, and also we're getting more into the clothes here. We're not getting so much into the,
I mean, we did hit the teeth.
We did hit the teeth. Okay, all right. Okay, well, you know what? Then I say touche.
Yeah.
To this person.
Yeah.
Fair point. But I don't know. This is funnier.
And he oversold the Pelosi thing. And also, we'll go through this another time. There are double standards it's like reparations double standards. But we'll talk about that.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Yeah. That is definitely true. Yes. Yes.
And he's a lot out there.
We have to make up for lost time by just making fun of men's appearance.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Every time we do that, women go forward a step. It's just one step forward towards what is it? One great step. One diss of a man, one great leap forward for women.
There we go. There we go. Yes.
There we go. Yeah. All right. So now we're going to get we're shifting gears, right? We're going to foreign policy now with Romney.
Back, the Biden administration is warning there's new evidence that Russia is planning to invade Ukraine. The U.S. is accusing Russia of sending saboteurs into Ukraine in a false flag operation in order to create a pretext for an invasion. A week of U.S.-Russian diplomatic talks failed to ease the tensions over Ukraine. The U.S. wants Russia to pull back its roughly 100,000 troops massed at Ukraine's border, and Russia wants NATO to pull its forces from Eastern Europe back to 1997 levels and a guarantee that Ukraine or really any other European country will never join NATO. So joining me now is Republican Senator Mitt Romney of Utah. He's a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and he's been someone who's been warning about the threat of Russia for years. Senator, welcome back to Meet the Press. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Chuck. Good to be with you.
Let me start with the current situation. It looks like talks failed. I guess my question is, I know you're probably somebody who says that there isn't a political will for the U.S.
Military options are
Should we move it up?
things we
Or
don't
do you wanna-
talk about, but other consequences we can align with our neighbors and make sure, or excuse me, with our allies and make sure that the Russians understand that this time it's going to make a real difference.
What does that look like? And why should Putin believe it if he somehow...
Sorry, should I have played the? Should I?
No, it's
just-
fine. No, it's fine to say here. What we're seeing here from Chuck, I mean, we don't need to hear the first minute or so because it's all it is. But what we're seeing here from Chuck is probably the top question that, you know, U.S. journalists, especially on the Sunday news shows, ask about Russia is, are we being tough enough on Russia? Are we sanctioning them enough? What else can we do? It's like every question starts from the framing of like, are we being sufficiently militaristic toward the world's other top nuclear power?
Right.
None of them think like, is it
Maybe
in
a
our
bad
benefit?
idea. Right.
Is it in our benefit and in the world's benefit to ratchet up tensions with the world's other top nuclear power and fund a proxy war on Russia's border? That's essentially what this crisis is about. Is the U.S. wants to use Ukrainians as bullet stoppers to fight a proxy war with Russia and encroach on its territory by moving, you know, NATO closer and closer to Russia. And when Russia pushes back, people from Mitt Romney to Chuck Todd lose their mind and demand more sanctions, more militarism, more weapons sales to Ukraine, which means more money for the weapons contractors in DC. So that's what Chuck Todd is asking here, is what else can we do to make the world a dangerous place?
Dangerous place, yeah, for you and for me and the entire human race.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little callback to Michael Jackson. Heal the world, make it a better place, but I'm making it a more dangerous place. All right, now,
which is the name of the album. It's that song is on Dangerous. So you know.
Whoa! Wow.
Yeah. All right, let's go back to Mitt.
Let's go back to Mitt. Yeah. Oh. Wilson, you're going to bring us back to Mitt?
All these tough sanctions before, and he's probably calculated, probably correctly, that there isn't a political will for the U.S. to engage militarily. So what is it that the U.S. could do that could really convince Putin he should back down?
Well, the clearest thing we can do is to make sure he doesn't have the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. As you know, that's a gas pipeline that provides extraordinary wealth to Putin and to Russia. It bypasses Ukraine. And the big mistake we made is to allow him to build that, to bypass Ukraine as we should have. We should let him know that.
That's an incredible statement, okay? This is a pipeline. It's not on U.S. territory. It's in Europe. It goes from Russia to Germany, which then connects Russian energy to the rest of Europe. The reason Germany did it is because they need the energy. They need to like heat their homes. And what Romney is saying is that we shouldn't have let that happen because, of course, we own the world. We decide what foreign countries get to do with their own affairs, coming down to such basics as how they power their homes, how they heat themselves. He's saying we shouldn't have let that happen. And the irony here, I mean, there's many.
So
but
he
it's
wants to freeze that. He wants to freeze.
Absolutely, he does. Yes,
it's not
he does.
Putin who wants to cause freezing in the United States.
These people want to freeze. These people want Europe to freeze because if they don't, then Russia will be able to make some money off of selling their main commodity, which is energy. I mean, that's the level of sort of like that. That's like how it's funny. Like, you know, Romney says he loves freedom. We stand against dictatorship. There's no bigger dictator in the world and globally than the U.S. to the point where its lawmakers decide that they have the right to decide for other people whether or not they can build their own pipelines. And the irony here is like the talking point around Ukraine is like when Russia asks the U.S. to guarantee that Ukraine will not join NATO, this hostile military alliance on its border, and when they ask the U.S. to, you know, promise not to position weapons in Ukraine, you know, everybody from Joe Biden to Mitt Romney says, well, we can't tell Ukraine what to do. It's a sovereign country. They have the right to decide for themselves their own economic and security policies. Well, here's Romney saying that we have the right to block pipelines from being built around Europe. And he's basically saying that he wants people to have their energy bills skyrocket and to go without power, because that is what killing the Nord Stream 2 pipeline would mean. And, you know, now what's funny is another irony of this is that this was the Trump administration's point of view too. I mean, point of view as well. So while, you know, Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi were going around speculating what Vladimir Putin has on Trump, whether he's being blackmailed with a P-tape or with financial leverage. Trump's administration was actually trying to do the policy of Mitt Romney and block the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. Joe Biden came in, and they're, I guess, a bit more sane on Russia. And they decided that they couldn't do that because Germany was saying there's no way. Like Germany was saying you're basically declaring war on our country. So the Biden administration backed down. So Biden actually doesn't support the Romney position fully, although they are still trying to solve the Nord Stream 2 pipeline in some ways. But it just speaks to how extreme the U.S. political spectrum has gotten, where a point of view like this is like, it's pretty normal. And there was just a measure this week in the Senate to try to push through more sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline.
Yeah. And as NF writes, WTF Romney is literally saying that U.S. should prevent Russia, Europe from infrastructure development and maintenance. Yeah.
And this is what a huge part of this Ukraine thing is about. It's the U.S. wants to, the war hawks want to stop Russia from benefiting from the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. Because again, we have the right that, according to them, to interfere other people's countries, and they don't want to see any kind of integration between Russia and the rest of Europe. And that's what this pipeline helps facilitate.
Yeah.
That Nord Stream 2 pipeline is not going to operate. He's not going to have that wealth. If he does any action to overthrow the government in Ukraine, that's getting shut down. I'd shut it down now, as a matter of fact. A huge error not to have done so already. And then I think the type of sanctions we put in place have to be of a different nature than those we've had in the past. And he has to understand that it's not just the U.S., but it's Germany and it's the U.K. and France and all of the EU are going to come together on a collective basis. Look, we recognize Vladimir Putin wants to reestablish a type of the Soviet Union. McCain used to joke that Russia is a gas station parading as a country. No one buys anything from Russia other than military hardware. Their population is, 1/10 of what China's is going to be? And so he's trying to reestablish what he had before. That can't be allowed to happen. And that's something we're going to have to come together and strengthen NATO. He's trying to take NATO apart to weaken it. NATO. We need a strong NATO, not just for Russia, but for the emergence of China.
Look, if he goes into Ukraine, are you supportive of this idea that we've been very public saying we do, which I think is part of the warning shots to Putin, of us supporting an insurgency? Basically what we did to the Soviets in Afghanistan and arguably what others may have done to us in Afghanistan.
Absolutely.
Okay, coming out openly as pro-insurgency. It's such a good look. You'd love to see it.
Pro-insurgency based on the model of arming and funding the people in Afghanistan who became Al-Qaeda.
Yeah. Like
Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
That's the model. But it's actually very apt.
Model.
It's very apt for Ukraine because when they talk about, arming insurgents in Ukraine, there's really only one specific candidate, and that is the groups like the Azov Battalion, which are essentially fascists and neo-Nazis.
Yeah.
So that's traditionally who the U.S. supports around the world when it wants to destabilize governments that are standing in the way of U.S. hegemony. It's far-right extremists. They've been doing that already in Ukraine. By even training with groups like the Azov Battalion and having weapons go their way. Israel's been involved in that too. They did that in Syria too. I mean, there was all this talk about the moderate rebels. No, these were sectarian fanatics that the U.S. arms because that's who's available. There's no such thing as freedom, peace loving moderate rebel in mass numbers. No, it's always the extremists, and that's what they're advocating here on the model of the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. It's extraordinarily revealing.
Yeah. By the way, reminder, you guys are going to definitely everyone should check out our episode from last week. Since we're speaking of foreign policy, and insurgency in Afghanistan, make sure you check out our episode with Mansour Adayfi. It's amazing. He survived Gitmo, and we have the extended interview coming out today. But Aaron, weren't you moved by him?
That was a very moving interview.
Yeah.
That was a very, very moving interview. Really powerful story. And, so much to say. I mean, there's stuff he didn't even get to talk about because he was there for 14 years, caged in Guantanamo. And so much happened during that period. And so, so much brave resistance. I mean, he went on hunger strike. He was force fed. I mean, it's a very crazy story. And it's funny again that, people like Mitt Romney posture about, U.S. exceptionalism and leading in human rights while still running this torture gulag.
Yeah.
by the way, in stolen territory, because of course Cuba does not want a torture site in its country.
Right. And the fact that it's still open is just so horrific. And then, as you'll see in the interview, like these people, they're owed reparations, and they should be. It's an outrage that they haven't gotten it. And as you see from Mansour's story, he's like in Serbia. He didn't even want to go there. So, and there's a stigma, and people won't get hired. I mean, it's just the fact that their suffering isn't over.
He's in Serbia while his family is being bombed.
In Yemen
with U.S. made weapons in Yemen.
Yeah.
All
right,
back to Mitt.
Back to Mitt. Yeah, 200 more likes for 1,000 guys. Hit that, smash that like button. Okay.
I think he has to understand that the consequences are going to be significant. And will there be insurgency there? Yeah, the Ukraine people are proud, and they know how to fight for the things they believe in and for their independence. And that and other features are going to be affected by virtue of Russia's malevolent action.
You know, in your opening op-ed as a senator, you wrote that in order for a...
That's good. I think it's enough.
Yeah.
They're saying armed insurgency. What could go wrong?
Yeah. God, I can't believe he says this stuff out loud.
Yeah.
Should we play a little mini flashback clip from a 2012 debate between Obama and Mitt?
Yes.
Let's listen to Obama here.
I'm glad that you recognize that al-Qaeda is a threat, because a few months ago, when you were asked what's the biggest geopolitical threat facing America, you said Russia. Not al-Qaeda, you said Russia. In the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back, because the Cold War has been over for 20 years. But Governor, when it comes to our foreign policy, you seem to want to import the foreign policies of the 1980s, just like the social policies of the 1950s and the economic policies of the 1920s. You say that you're not interested in duplicating what happened in Iraq, but just a few weeks ago you said you think we should have more troops in Iraq right now.
Anyway, sick burn from Obama. The 1980s wants their foreign policy back. Yeah.
That was a brief moment in time when the Democrats were actually, better
than Republicans on
trying to distance themselves from Cold War rhetoric. And then, of course, 2016 happened, and they fully embraced it. I mean, you could argue
back
even more than Republicans have, in at least in recent years, because there's some kind of split in the Republican Party where the Trump wing flirts sometimes with criticizing the Cold War, although of course they ultimately still accept all the underlying policies anyway. So it comes that but rhetorically, right? I mean, Democrats have sounded exactly like what Barack Obama mocked back in 2012. And look, basically what's happened since is that Russia has stood up a little bit to U.S. hegemony, and when you do that, that puts you on the U.S. target list. It's the same reason why Iran is the constant target of U.S. sanctions and sabotage and all efforts at destabilization, because Iran is a counter to U.S. hegemony in the Middle East. And the same with Russia, after being basically pushed around in the years after the Cold War. Russia's economy was privatized by the U.S. essentially, with the Chicago boys and the advisors that Clinton sent over to basically ruin Russia's economy. And after a long period of real hardship, Putin, whatever you think of him, has started to actually stand up to U.S. hegemony. He at the Munich Security Conference in 2007, he gave a speech. I believe it's 2007. He gave a speech that really offended John McCain, where he talked about the enlargement of NATO going up to Russia's borders and how Russia was not going to tolerate that. And that has put Putin and Russia on the U.S. target list. And you go through all these series of things, like, for example, responding to the U.S.-backed coup in Ukraine in 2014, intervening in Syria, where, as John Kerry said, Russia came in because they didn't want an ISIS government. That's literally what John Kerry said about Russia, where basically the U.S. was watching, in Kerry's words, as ISIS was approaching on Damascus, and the U.S. was basically using ISIS's advance as leverage to try to get Assad to leave and basically have regime change in Syria. Russia came in and stopped that. So that has put Russia even more in the crosshairs of the U.S. establishment, and Democrats, after a brief period of criticizing that, now that Russia actually is challenging U.S. hegemony, now Democrats are in perfect lockstep with what they once mocked in Mitt Romney.
Yeah. And speaking of Iran, let's go to the next clip, which is from Face the Nation.
We go now to White House National Security Advisor Jake
I
Sullivan.
gave the time
Good
code for
morning
that.
to you, Jake. I want to.
Yeah, 6:43.
And by the way, you know, speaking of what we were saying before about the U.S. siding with extremists around the world, nobody said it better than Jake Sullivan. There's a leaked email from February 2012, so almost 10 years ago next month, where Jake Sullivan writes to Hillary Clinton, and he says to her, "Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria." That's a direct quote. So that just speaks to this history of the U.S. siding with far-right extremists around the world if it means destabilizing governments the U.S. wants to overthrow or undermine, to the point where it even means siding, in Jake Sullivan's words, with the people behind 9/11.
Right. Hey, choices, hard choices. Hard choices.
Jake,
yeah.
quickly on Iran, Secretary of State says we are very, very, very short on time. Iran's getting very close here to the ability to produce a weapon. Aren't they just playing for time?
Well, I would say two things on this front. Number one, our policy is straightforward. We are determined to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. Number two, we believe that diplomacy is the best way to do that.
Yeah.
But as you said, and as the Secretary of State has said, time is running short. And I was in Israel at the end of last month, coordinating on the possibility that diplomacy does not proceed.
Yeah.
We are working closely with our European allies and partners on this as well. And we will find a way forward. But Margaret, critical point here.
Jake,
the
I've
reason
gotta
we're
wrap
in the
you, I'm
situation
sorry.
we're in right now is because the previous administration pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, and we are paying the wages of that catastrophic mistake.
Understood. Jake Sullivan, thank you.
So time is running out.
This is the weirdest line I can think of from the Biden administration. They're constantly blaming the Trump administration, accurately, for pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal. True. Right. But the problem is, but the problem is Biden's been in power for over a year now, or just about a year now, right? Like a year. And it's Biden who has chosen not to return to the Iran deal.
Right.
And there's nothing stopping him from doing that except for the Biden administration's own choices. So this talking point of like the responsibility goes to Trump for pulling out of the Iran deal, that would be true if this were before Biden took office. If this were at, before the, but now Biden's the president.
Right.
And they could come back.
It.
Yeah.
Right.
But they're totally stalling their feet, and they're basically refusing to lift even some of the sanctions that Trump reimposed to kill the Iran deal, because ultimately it's like the U.S. rulers are so committed to hegemony that they even would rather undermine their own previous policy,
right,
than sort of give up any kind of stake to U.S. power. And that's what these sanctions represent, is the ability of the U.S. to destroy countries if they want to, for standing in the way of U.S. hegemony. And it was the Obama administration that actually crafted and imposed the harshest maximum pressure sanctions on Iran initially, before they got lifted, and then before Trump reimposed them. But now it's Biden's baby. He's overseeing it now.
It's his policy now.
He's continuing the Trump policy.
Right. And it's also like you guys ran on the Iran deal, right? Like that was a big part of the diplomacy of Obama that you touted, and then you just totally undermine it.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, well, that was our Monday morning. Any final thoughts? I mean, also it's so ridiculous. The whole like time is running out. Iran is doing something bad. They shouldn't be allowed to do it. There's no like it's just this assumption again, this total that the United States is supposed to be in charge of everything.
Oh, of course, yeah, of course, of course, yeah. Yeah, that's just like that's the premise that everybody accepts, is the U.S. has the right to do whatever it wants and to stop other countries from doing what they want, even when, of course, they're left with little choice. When the U.S. is imposing murderous sanctions on a country and is engaged in efforts at regime change or destabilization, countries need to build deterrence, and that's what Iran, by and again, Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapons program, but they are leaving open the capacity to develop one because there's no diplomatic option, and they're constant, and history tells you that if you don't have a deterrent, the U.S. can destroy your country. Like look at Iraq, look at Libya. When Libya gave up its weapons program, that led to it being, invaded by NATO or NATO doing a bombing campaign and backing, again, right-wing insurgents who now have left the country in ruins and divided.
Sodomized Omar Gaddafi. And then killed him, obviously. So question, does Aaron believe multipolarity will cause a world war like many right and left theorize? Heard through
so like the concept that there should be multiple poles of power. I mean, the alternative
like
is
China, Russia. Yeah.
I think not living under one global hegemon is the best way to avoid war, because when you have no counter to the hegemon, then the hegemon can wage multiple wars, as the U.S. has been doing for a long time. So no, I don't think that multipolarity increases the chance of world war. Because again, a world war means suicide if we're talking about the U.S. going up against Russia.
Unipolarity is so peaceful. Well, Tony Platt points out. Someone else also asked about whether you what your predictions were on Ukraine were.
I don't know. I mean, now there's talk, and I don't know how serious this is, but now there's talk of Russia positioning weapons in Cuba or Venezuela. So we have a repeat of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
I don't know how realistic that is. Russia, though, does seem very serious, and my understanding of Russia, and I don't study the country internally too closely. I study more Russiagate and how Russia is used here in the West, but is that they don't, it's rare for them to make threats like this, but they seem very, very serious about following through. So at first I was skeptical that a military operation inside Ukraine would happen, but maybe it's possible. I mean, again, and I don't think Russia would march to like Kiev and occupy all of Ukraine. They would probably just go to the Russian aligned regions in the Donbass and maybe take that over. Although that creates some new problems for them. So I don't know. I'm also skeptical that they do that. So basically, I have no idea. But what I do think is that this is very, very serious. We're talking about a real threat of military conflict between the world's two nuclear powers. And there's no force right now in the U.S. that is trying to advocate serious diplomacy. And serious diplomacy would mean taking seriously this Russian demand that Ukraine not be a part of a hostile military alliance on Russia's borders. We would expect the same thing of Canada or Mexico, not to join a military alliance where if there's a conflict, say between the U.S. and Mexico or the U.S. and Canada, their allies would be legally required to join their fight and have a war. So Russia doesn't want that on its borders with Ukraine. And there's just across the spectrum, there's no interest in even discussing that or discussing some kind of similar arrangement, like say guaranteed neutrality for Ukraine for all sides. So, not joining Russia in a military alliance and not joining the U.S. either. There hasn't even been an interest in that. So what I do know is that it's very serious right now. And it's dangerous.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to Useful Idiots for extra episodes. You also get the bonus, the audio from these live streams. And yeah, it's this week's interview with Mansour is really great. Matt, for people who are checking in, Matt is on sabbatical writing a book. So, but Aaron was anointed.
And as I offered last week, if it helps, you can call me Aaron Maté.
Yeah, Aaron Maté. Yeah. Okay, so you feel more.
That's my concession. That's the best I can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Aaron is a great fill-in. Someone wrote, yes. There's. Whoops, I didn't mean to do this. Where is it? Well, someone wrote Katie and Aaron. Here we go. Oh, Vlad. Of course, someone named Vlad. J. Vladcliffe said that about Aaron.
Is that you, Vladimir? Is that
Vlad.
you? what a clever way to hide yourself.
Yeah,
Vladimir.
seriously. Yeah. Saint Buzzsaw. Where do you get the name Buzzsaw?
I mean, someone called me that. Jamari Thomas, who's a progressive
Soapbox.
Soapbox, yeah.
That's the show, right? Progressive Soapbox?
He named me that, I'm pretty sure. And I'm pretty sure he named me that after, I don't know if you remember when I interviewed Luke Harding of The Guardian.
Yeah.
So
about his book Collusion.
Yeah, by Collusion. So I think I'm pretty sure that is what precipitated. And then Jimmy Dore has run with that too. He calls me that as well. So hence the Buzzsaw.
Yeah, nice. All right. Well, we'll see you guys later this week with our main episode. We'll see you next week with our live. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.